150 years ago, an ordinary working man could go 10 years without a woman in his life and never once think of himself as unfinished. He was the same man you are, with the same wants and the same thin skin. What he had was a Thursday night that already belonged to other men, with his name written down in a book and a fine waiting for him if he skipped it twice. Strip that away, and he would have needed a wife exactly as badly as you do. So whether a man can stand on his own comes down to how his week is built. A man is fine alone when there are standing obligations in his week that don't pass through a woman, a room that expects him, men who come up short if he stops showing, a job somewhere with his name attached to it. The Victorians got that handed to them at 19. You have to build the same thing yourself from an empty calendar. Being wrong about this costs you about a decade. You spend it treating an empty week as a dating problem, running the apps, upgrading your look, reading about what women respond to, all of it aimed at the one thing that was never the shortage. And when you do land a good relationship, the emptiness is still sitting there underneath it, and now she's standing on top of it. Then it costs you a second time, worse when that relationship gets tested. A man with one relationship and nothing else can't afford to lose it. He can't hold a line or walk out of a room because the price of being wrong is his entire life going dark at once. You can hear that in how a man like that talks. So can she. Picture the ordinary week those men actually walked into, because it's duller than the nostalgia version. An upstairs room over a pub, 30 to 80 men, someone reading minutes out loud, dues collected in coin and written in a ledger. An argument about whether a member's claim for sick pay was legitimate. About as stirring as a parking committee. Inside those dull rule books sat a clause that would sound unbelievable to a man today. If a member fell ill, other members were assigned to sit with him, in rotation, by name, according to a list. Miss your turn, and you were fined. Sitting up at a sick man's bedside was written down as an enforceable duty with money attached to it. Take a second on what that actually delivered. A man burning up with fever in 1883 knew who was coming because the name was on the list. He didn't have to be likable, and nobody had to remember him fondly. He had a claim on other men, they had a claim on him, and the whole thing was on paper. When he died, the society buried him and paid something to his widow. He'd bought all of it at 19 for a few pennies a week. This was mainstream. In 1897, an American writer tried to count the men in fraternal orders across the country, the lodges, brotherhoods, and mutual aid outfits, and came out above 5 million. The adult male population of the United States at the time was somewhere around 19 million. Better than 1 man in 4, carrying a card, owing dues, attending. Britain was denser still. Friendly society membership ran into the millions well before 1880. There were over 700 mechanics' institutes, where working men went to hear lectures and borrow books. The working men's clubs organized into a national union in 1862. Choral societies that needed the same 12 baritones every week. Volunteer fire brigades, cricket sides that had to field 11 men every Saturday and came knocking when you weren't one of them. Notice where a woman fits into that life. He married in his mid or late 20s after he had a trade, a wage, and a card in his pocket. By the time she arrived, there was already a shape for her to arrive into, a week with fixed nights in it, men who knew his name, a role he held. She joined a life that was running. Nobody was asking her to be the life, which is why a long stretch with nobody didn't break those men. Being unmarried at 31 meant he had no wife. It didn't mean he had no one who would notice his absence, no place to be on Thursday, no one obligated to sit with him if he got sick. The bad version of single, the version you know, is a man with no woman and no room either. Those are two completely different conditions, and we've stopped being able to tell them apart. Now, there's a hostile reading of all this, and it's a good one, so here it is at full size. It goes like this. This is nostalgia for a poorer world. Those men didn't join for company. They joined because there was no welfare state and a broken leg meant your children didn't eat. Insurance does that job better and cheaper now. Nothing was lost that anyone should want back. And it gets sharper. The same reading says loneliness today is a personal failure dressed up as a historical one. Nobody stopped you from calling your friends. Your phone holds 200 numbers. You can be anywhere in the country in a day. And there are clubs and leagues and groups in every town. A man alone in 2026 chose it, one skipped invitation at a time, and blaming a defunct lodge is an excuse. Start with the insurance part because it's true, and it's the exact reason the whole thing works. Those men absolutely did join for the sick pay. The money was the hook. But the money required attendance. Meetings, dues in person, votes on claims, your turn on the rota, and attendance is what put the same 40 men in the same room twice a month for 30 years. The friendship was a byproduct of a financial arrangement. Money on the table produces friendship far more reliably than liking someone does. Liking someone gets you 2 dinners a year. An obligation with money on it gets you 600 evenings across 3 decades, and after 600 evenings, a man knows your father's name and what you're worried about. They had a system that manufactured intimacy as a side effect, while everyone thought they were buying insurance. So when the state took over the sick pay in 1911, and the health service arrived in 1948, and commercial insurers started paying burial money without requiring anyone to show up anywhere, every one of those was an improvement, and every one of them removed the reason men walked into the room. The service got replaced. The room never did. That's the trade nobody was around to object to, because it happened over 2 generations and looked like progress the whole way. Then the part about just calling people. On paper, sure. Watch what men actually do, and it falls apart fast. A man will drive 50 minutes each way for a Sunday league game where he's one of 11 and somebody's counting. That same man will not drive 12 minutes to a friend's house on an open Tuesday, and both of you know it. Take the fixture away, and the driving stops immediately. It's how a schedule works. Men show up to things that expect them and skip things that merely permit them. And this has been true of every man in every century, including the Victorians, which is precisely why their societies wrote fines into the rules instead of trusting anyone's good intentions. They understood the men they were dealing with. We built a world with no fines and then blamed the men for not showing. And there's a tell inside that hostile reading that gives the whole thing away. If a man's isolation really were a personal failure, it would be spread evenly across time. Some men bad at it in 1890, some men bad at it now, roughly the same share. In 1990, about 3% of American men said they had no close friends at all. By 2021, that figure was around 15%, 1 man in 7 reporting nobody. 5 times worse inside 30 years. Nobody's character changed that fast. What changed is that the rooms kept closing and nothing opened in their place. The halls sold off, the local plants gone, work moving men across the country every 4 years, the club that used to need you fielding a side out of the same 4 families. Same men, different infrastructure, and the difference shows up in the numbers within one working lifetime. Look at what actually happens to a man who has no room, because it's worse than being alone on a Saturday. The heaviest part of it lands on the one relationship he does have, and on what that load does to the relationship itself. Somewhere in the last century, the wife quietly absorbed about 5 jobs. Confidant, best friend, social organizer, the person who hears about work and the only witness to his existence. Every one of those used to sit with a different set of people, the men on Thursday, the neighbors, the brother-in-law down the road, the lads at the plant. All 5 now sit with one woman who has a full-time job and her own difficult week. She feels the weight long before he understands he's applying it. It shows up as her getting a little tired when he starts a sentence about work. He picks that up. Men always pick that up. And he begins rationing. He mentions the bad thing lightly once, then drops it and doesn't raise it again. Now there's a man in that house with a real problem who has told exactly nobody, and the nobody includes her. That's how a man ends up completely alone inside a relationship he'd describe as good. There's no fight, there's no villain in it. He's just running his entire life down one wire and rationing what he sends so the wire doesn't get sick of him. Ask a married man when he last talked about something that mattered with someone who wasn't his wife. Watch how far back he has to reach. Then it gets worse in a direction most men never see coming, which is what dependency does to how he behaves with her. When a relationship is the only structure a man has, every disagreement in it is an existential event. She's short with him on a Tuesday, and that isn't one rough exchange inside a full week. That's the whole relational content of his week going wrong at once. So he starts managing her mood instead of living his life. He drops things to be available. He goes quiet when he disagrees because the argument might spiral and he can't afford where it might go. He agrees to plans he doesn't want. None of this reads to her as devotion. It reads as a man with no weight of his own, and there is no way to hide it from someone who sees you every day. And the thing he's doing all that to protect is the very thing it destroys. She wanted a man with his own life, and she's watching one whose life is her. Her replies get shorter, and he answers by leaning in harder, which speeds up the exact thing he's trying to stop. That whole spiral runs on one input, and the input is an empty calendar. Compare that to the man who has 3 fixed things in his week that have nothing to do with her. One bad conversation can't take him apart, and everything he does follows from that. He can leave a room. He can say what he thinks. When he chooses her on Saturday, she can tell it was a choice because she knows what else was on the table. Then there's the version that shows up after it ends, which is where the missing structure sends its final bill. Think about the man who comes out of a 15 or 20-year marriage. The couples they saw for years all came in through her. She made the plans, she kept up the messages, and when it broke, the wives sorted out who kept whom, and he wasn't part of that conversation. He walks out with half the house and a Saturday with nothing in it. The whole social side of his adult life was in her name, like a lease he never read. It didn't transfer. And this is why so many men come out of a divorce and are effectively in a relationship again within about 6 months, often with the first woman who was kind to them. It isn't romantic urgency. It's a man with no room to go to, doing the only move he knows. It runs the same way after a death, and even the same way when nothing goes wrong at all. The man who moves 1,100 miles for her job and 2 years in has co-workers and a wife and nobody else on earth in that city. If she travels for a month, he speaks to no one outside work for a month. He'd start to notice around day 9. He'd never say a word about it to her because what exactly would he be complaining about? What these men have in common is that every one of them did the thing he was told to do. Got the relationship, kept it, prioritized it, moved for it, poured everything into it. None of them was neglectful. They executed the plan the culture handed them, and the plan had a hole in it where 40 men on a Thursday used to be. What the Victorian man really had was claims. Other men owed him specific things in writing, and he owed them the same, and both sides could be called in. That's the machinery underneath the phrase, a man who doesn't need a woman, and it is completely manufacturable. It's built out of nights on a calendar. He also got something you can't buy directly, which is a place where he was known for something other than being a boyfriend or a husband. He was the treasurer. He was the one who kept the books straight, or the one who could be trusted with the roof money, or the man in the second row of the choir who never missed. A role held in public with witnesses to how well he held it. That's the ground a man stands on when a relationship gets hard, and it's why he can survive it not working out. He doesn't lose his identity when she goes, because his identity was never stored inside her. He loses a woman he cared about. That's painful, and it's survivable, and the difference between those two outcomes was decided years earlier by what he built or didn't build. I see this constantly, men trying to solve it from the wrong end, chasing the relationship first and hoping the rest of a life shows up attached to it. Build the Thursday first and the whole board changes. Being single stops being a waiting room and becomes a completely functional way to live for as long as you want, with men who'd notice if you vanished. From there, choosing yourself isn't settling for anything. It's the strongest position on offer, and a relationship becomes something you accept because it's genuinely good, never because you can't face the alternative. Here's what this actually asks of you, and it's smaller and more boring than you'd expect. One thing on a fixed schedule, recurring, in person, with men, where somebody notices attendance. It could be a volunteer fire or rescue crew, a church men's group, a union branch, a workshop where 4 guys meet every Wednesday to finish a build, an amateur side that's short a player without you, or a choir if you can carry a tune. The test for whether it counts is attendance. If nobody registers that you weren't there, it's a hobby, and a hobby doesn't do this work. What you need is the thing that made those societies work, a spot that stays yours, whether or not you feel like occupying it, and a small consequence when you don't. Fines are gone. The men noticing are not, and that turns out to be enough, which means the weeks you don't want to go are the entire transaction. Go on the wrong night, tired, after a bad day. Enjoyment is optional and irrelevant. The man in 1883 was buying exactly that with his pennies, a claim he could call in years later when something in his life went badly wrong. Expect it to be dull for a while. The first 2 months, you'll stand around with men whose surnames you don't know, and nothing will feel like it's happening. Month 7, somebody saves you a seat. Month 20, one of them calls you the night his father dies. This runs on the calendar, and calendars only pay out with time on them, which is exactly why you start now, instead of at the moment you need it. Run 1 check at 6 months. Skip a week without warning anybody and see whether a man messages you to ask where you were. If somebody does, you have the thing this whole video is about, and you have it in writing on a schedule. If nobody does after 6 months of showing up, you picked the wrong room. That happens. Go find another one and start the clock again. Do that for 2 or 3 years, and the situation reverses itself. When something serious lands on you, there are 3 or 4 men you'd tell before any woman hears about it. When a relationship ends, your week survives it. When you meet someone worth having, she walks into a life with a shape already in it and gets to be the best part of that life rather than the beams holding it up. The Victorians had rooms, and the rooms had lists with names on them, and the lists made ordinary men into men who could stand alone for years without breaking. The rooms closed. Nobody built new ones, and building one landed on you. That's the whole thing. Get 1 fixed night a week with men who count heads and keep it for 2 years. A man who has that is complete on his own, and everything good that happens with a woman after that is something he chose rather than something he needed.